Thank you very much. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I am seeing that. And both Therese and Gianluca will respond to them to make sure that you have the interpretation. So I do want to welcome you. It's a delight to be here in this gathering in this week of Pentecost. My name is Sister Maria Simperman. I'm a religious of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and I serve as the Synodality Coordinator here at UISG. Today's Synodality session is done as a collaboration between WUCWO, the World Union of Catholic Women's Organizations, and UISG. And in this vein, we first invite Mrs. Monica Santamaria, president of WUCWO, to offer words of welcome and some words about WUCWO on this topic. So, bienvenidos, mi hermana.
Thank you, Maria. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. It is a pleasure for us to collaborate with UISG through our School of Synodality, the Catholic World Organization. WOCA is a group of faithful that unites Catholic women. Our mission is to promote the presence and participation, full and co-responsible participation of Catholic women in the church and in society so that they can comply with their evangelization mission and work towards the development of the world. We represent more than 80 million women in the 5 continents through 100 organizations. And we promote the formation of women, we promote exchange, and we are also bridges. We bring the voices and needs of women at grassroots level to international forums. In 2021, we created the World Observatory of Women in order to give visibility to all women, particularly to the most vulnerable, in order to generate synergies, to inspire and to generate public policies that promote integral human relationship and that of their families and communities. And through the observatory, we have taken part in the synodal process. In 2023, we have interviewed over 150 women responsible of the synodal process at diocesan, national, and continental level. We've seen the results, and we created in 2024 the School of Synodality in order to promote this methodology among women and the people of God. And through this institution, we have organized synergies, web conferences with experts, and we have formed facilitators in 77 countries. We have had conversations in the spirit with over 800, 900 participants, and we have come up with witness videos of initiatives carried out by women at the grassroots level so as to promote the full participation of women in the synodal church and in mission. And we have carried out a survey with women who have taken part in the synodal process in order to get to know their achievements. You can get to know all of these in our webpage, and thanks very much for being with us, and let us continue walking together. Thank you.
Gracias, gracias. Thank you, Monica. It's a delight to work together. There's so much common cause in what we're doing. And now we invite Sister Roxanne Shares, SSND, the Associate Executive Secretary of UISG, to offer words of welcome to you from UISG. So, Sister Roxanne?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Maria. So on behalf of UISG, a warm welcome to everyone who's on this webinar. It's really a joy and a privilege for us to join WUCWO in sponsoring this event to explore the possibilities and responsibilities for our participation in our church as women, as laity in mission. And for those who may not know UISG, The International Union of Superiors General is a union of more than 1,900 congregational leaders of institutes of women religious dedicated to apostolic work, with nearly 600,000 sisters living and serving in more than 95 countries on 6 continents. For us, collaboration in and for mission is vital, and today provides an opportunity for this, for us to reflect together from different perspectives on the spaces already open to us to live our call as missionary disciples, to be a missionary church, a living witness of the gospel, of God's love in ways relevant, meaningful, and needed in these times. All of us share responsibility for the mission of God entrusted to us. However often I've noticed that our awareness of who we are, our perspectives and understandings may be a bit too small. So together we can open ourselves to a larger reality as we listen deeply, dialogue and reflect, discern and act, filled with the Spirit and on fire with the love that has been poured into our hearts. A line from paragraph number 60 of the Synod document says it well. What comes from the Holy Spirit cannot be stopped. So let's continue to celebrate and live Pentecost. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sister Roxanne. So what a wonderful introduction from both of our women leaders here. And so let us begin, because that is the topic that we're engaging. And so as we're looking at what we're doing today, I want to offer the context for this session. And it's really paragraph 60. And so allow me to just show it to you in a slow enough manner, because this is what we will open up. So. Paragraph 60 from the final Synod document, which is part of the church teaching. Pope Francis at the end of the Synod said, I don't need to write an apostolic exhortation. This is who we are, and I have been part of this process, and it has integrity. So here is what we say as church and that we're called to open up, and it's all in paragraph 60. By virtue of baptism, women and men have equal dignity as members of the people of God. However, women continue to encounter obstacles in obtaining a fuller recognition of their charisms, vocation, and place in all the various areas of the church's life. This is to the detriment of serving the church's shared mission. Scripture attests to the prominent role of many women in the history of salvation. One woman, Mary Magdalene, was entrusted with the first proclamation of the resurrection. On the day of Pentecost, Mary, Mother of God, was present, accompanied by many other women who had followed the Lord. It is important that the scripture passages that relate these stories find adequate space inside liturgical lectionaries. Crucial turning points in church history confirm the essential contribution of women moved by the Spirit. Women make up the majority of churchgoers and are often the first witnesses to the faith in families. They are active in the life of small Christian communities and parishes. They run schools, hospitals, and shelters. They lead initiatives for reconciliation and promoting human dignity and social justice. Women contribute to theological research and are present in positions of responsibility in church institutions, in diocesan curia, and the Roman curia. There are women who hold positions of authority and are leaders of their communities. This assembly asks for full implementation of all the opportunities already provided for in canon law with regard to the role of women, particularly in those places where they remain underutilized. There is no reason or impediment that should prevent women from carrying out leadership roles in the church. What comes from the Holy Spirit cannot be stopped. Additionally, the question of women's access to diaconal ministry remains open. This discernment needs to continue. This assembly also asks that more attention be given to the language and images used in preaching, teaching, catechesis, and the drafting of official church documents, more space to the contributions of female saints, theologians, and mystics. Key here is this line on top: full implementation of all the opportunities already provided for in canon law with regard to the role of women, particularly in those places where they remain underutilized. This is what we're going to open up today. What are those? What is some way of seeing the beginnings of what this is? And so, as we begin, we will offer first some of the theological foundations for this statement. And that is what Sister Susan Wood will explore. Then, Sister Josie Angalula will name what these opportunities are. We keep hearing this, but what exactly, what are they? Name them, name some of them. What are some of these ministries that are already available? Finally, Professor Miriam Lyons will offer some insight on what canon law says about participation of women and laymen. Because here, whatever we're speaking about in terms of women also includes laymen. So just to say that, our brothers are in this with us as well. So what is being said about this in governance, some of the developments and arguments that people would use against this or for this, and the implications for the future. We will have silence after each of the brief presentations and some opportunity for you to jot what's stirring in you, what's moving in you, what questions, what reflections, maybe what resistances are coming forth. And we invite you, if you wish, to put those also in the chat so that there's an ongoing conversation that flows. After the three present, and we'll do something in between there as well, I'll explain later, we will invite the large group to conversation. And so both in the chat and then bringing it to our three wonderful and very talented and skilled presenters and conversation partners. So the goal is to together ponder this in the season of Pentecost. I will introduce each speaker and try to add a bit to the introduction that's already listed in the website. And so we begin with our first speaker, and she will speak in English. It's Sister Susan Wood, a Sister of Charity of Leavenworth, Kansas. She's professor of systematic theology at Regis College in the Toronto School of Theology in Canada. She has her doctorate in systematic theology from Marquette University. Very active in ecumenical work, she has served on the U.S. Lutheran Roman Catholic Dialogue and the North American Roman Catholic Orthodox Theological Consultation, as well as the International Lutheran Catholic Dialogue and the conversation between the Baptist World Alliance and the Roman Catholic Church. She embodies ecumenism here. She serves on the editorial advisory board of the journal Ecclesiology and the Toronto School of Journal of Theology. She served as president of the Catholic Theological Society of America in 2014 to 2015 and received the John Courtney Murray Award in 2021. It is the most significant award that conference offers. Most of her writing explores the connections between ecclesiology and sacramental theology. And please note, her most recent book just came out, A Synodal Church, The Christian Faithful on Pilgrimage. It is worth a read. It's an important book. So we've really brought the expert here to us. And so, Susan, you are most welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. I think there we are. Can everybody see it? So today I'm going to talk about the ecclesial foundations for women in leadership, that there is a place for us in the church, and I'm going to explain what that is. As paragraph 60 said, it all starts with baptism. And in baptism, we become the Christian faithful, which is termed in the document of Lumen Gentium, the Christi Fidelis, the Christian faithful. As the paragraph 60 mentioned, baptism establishes our equal identities in the church, that no matter our place or condition in life, we are equal in baptism. The other thing that happens in baptism is that we are deputed for the public worship of the church in the liturgical assembly. And one of my convictions is that our role in the liturgy is parallel to our role in the church. So that if we are called to full, conscious, active participation in the liturgy, as Vatican II tells us, we are called to full, active, conscious participation in the church through baptism. And in baptism, all are the people of God, distinguished by charisms and ministries. As St. Paul tells us, there are a variety of charisms, which is a gift given to an individual by the Holy Spirit for the upbuilding of the church. And just as there are many, there's one body, but many members. And so within this view of the church, baptism is the sacrament that gives us this place. Just as all people are active subjects of the liturgy, we have one presider, but everybody celebrates. All are also active subjects in the church. And in the Synod documents, it's clear that with everybody in this Christian faithful, all are called to discern in the church. But because there is a difference of ministries and charisms and positions, in addition to discerning, the magisterium, that is the teaching office of the church, judges and makes a final decision. So just as in a religious community, there may be consultation and discernment of the whole. It's the religious superior who makes the final decision with her council. A similar thing happens in the church. So in this view of the church established by baptism, there's an Orthodox theologian, John Zizioulas, who talks about baptism as an ordination. By this, he is not confusing ordination to priesthood or to the episcopacy with the ordination of baptism. But ordination is related to this word order, which gives us, again, our order in the liturgical assembly and in the church. And so the church starts out with this communion, and these on the screen, the X's, the S's, and the O's and the V's represent different charisms, different ministries in the church, and that the church comes first, and those charisms and ministries serve the church. And we receive our place in the church. This is a changed perspective, because I think most of us are used to thinking in terms of a binary hierarchy laity. The laity are the nones, they're the non-ordained, and it's a kind of a leftover concept, and it emphasizes the distinction between clergy and laity. In this notion of starting with the community is first with this variety of charisms and ministries. And this highlights the unity of the baptized without denying the variety represented by the gifts of the Spirit. In the Dogmatic Constitution on the Church from Vatican II, the chapter on the people of God, which is chapter 2, precedes the chapters on the hierarchy and on religious life, because what it emphasizes is what we all share in common before there are divisions or distinctions within this community. So it's not like within this, it's everybody has a place in the church. Everybody has a ministry. Some of these people are ordained. And so, the first category is the people of God. And so I prefer if we could find a way to avoid the word laity, actually, because it's caused problems. And so what baptism does, and then what ordination does further, is to give us this position in the church. And ordination is a repositioning in the church. Baptism is a positioning in the church, and that all ministries are relational. So rather than being in competition with one another, the emphasis is on establishing mutual relationships with the diversity in the church. And these, dialogue is such an important piece of synodality. These are dialogical relationships that emphasize the equality of the Christian faithful across a variety of charisms, positions, and ministries with the ecclesial body. Ordination is a designation to a certain relationship within the body for the service of the body, not an elevation in status. So again, going back to the baptismal foundation, there is a difference in what we do. There's a difference in how we serve the church, but an emphasis on equality within that difference. So the center of gravity in this view of the church shifts from an ordained ministry, which has dominated our concept of church, to the church as a whole. So it's not like Christ designates priests, and then priests then serve the community, which results, but Christ creates a priestly community from which some are ordained, some are not ordained, but have other positions of leadership. So each church member has a charism, a service, or a proper ministry necessary in their variety and diversity for the edification, which means the building up of all in the one ecclesial body of Christ. So the themes of the synod were communion, participation, and mission. And so what this view of the church does is emphasize the church as communion. It emphasizes that all are called to participate, and the purpose for all of this is the mission of the church. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Those are profound ways to look, to shape, to reshape how we've engaged with roles and ministries. And so thank you for moving us to both different language, a starting point that's still baptism, but looks at the community first, and then says, what are the gifts of the Spirit to all of these to the people of God, and how do we move in light of that? So you're giving us spaces, you and the Spirit, for us to just see new ways that have been there, but are asking to be fulfilled. So we invite some silence now. There was a lot in this, and just invite those of you, everybody here, what's sticking with you? What's moving in you? What did you hear that you want to sit with, ponder, probe? And so we invite you to jot something down for yourself, but also you are most welcome to put this in the chat as well. So just 2 minutes of silence to soak in. I see we have a few comments already coming forth in your reflections. So hold those, write those. I'm going to now introduce to you our next speaker, and it's Sister Josie Ngalula from the Democratic Republic of Congo. She will be speaking in French. She is a sister of St. Andrew in Kinshasa, Congo. She has a doctorate in theology from the Catholic University of Lyon, and she is professor of systematic theology at the Catholic University of Congo, and also serves at other theological institutions in Africa. She is a member of the following institutions and research groups. She is a member of the International Theological Commission, the African Synodality Initiative, the Pan-African Catholic Theology and Pastoral Network, the Association of African Theologians, and the Ecumenical Theological Network, Sena Malaka. So, Sister Josie, would you offer some explanation about what are those areas that are already available but underutilized in many places? And just so you know, I will be moving the PowerPoint as Josie is speaking. So give me one moment to get on, or you can begin talking and we will catch up.
Excuse me, Jose, we have no English translation.
Can you hear? Can you hear?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Can you hear the English translation?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I'll be speaking about evangelization and the ministry of the word following the exhortation Christi Fideles Laici about women. There are women who have received a special role in the church, and their presence, active and responsible presence in the church, is underlined in the apostolic exhortation Christi Fideles Laici. In the field of the women, there is, for example, the ministry of the catechesis in the field of evangelization. Women are present and they are involved, having a role of theologians. Women are involved in spiritual accompaniment and in the ministry of the word. And here in this slide, you have all the involvement of women in the field of evangelization. About the ministry of the word, women are present in catechesis in parishes, formation in schools, academic institutions, meetings, public statements, spiritual retreats, religious missions, and other forms of preaching. In the field of liturgy, we have also women who are present and accompany the preparation to sacraments. And this is to them a vocation confirmed with a right of institution. So this is the field of liturgy. Speaking about the administration of the church, we have teachers who run the who are diocesan directors. They are involved in the pastoral, and women who are involved in the diocesan councils. We have women who are active in the dioceses, in religious institutes, women who are episcopal delegates for religious formation. About administration, we have women who are experts and consultants, and they are delegates in the field of administration. We have also women who are chairman of commissions of theology, or women who are chairman in councils, in episcopal and continental councils. As far as administration is concerned, we have women who are involved in universities, in Catholic universities, and women who are principal in schools, in lay association, and in diocesan or parish councils. And we have different roles for women in the administration of ecclesial institutions. As regard the legal system, we have women who are chancellors, who are legal experts, who are postulants, women who are delegates or administrators in a parish. They are named by the bishop, and they are delegate of the Episcopal Conference. Women who are general secretary of the Continental Episcopal Conference, and they have special charges, special tasks, and a consulting power. About governance, we have women who are secretaries or consultants of the bishop. These are the many possibilities that are given to women, but which are our responsibilities as women. We must be aware that it is up to us to try all possible appropriate paths for exploiting the contribution of qualified women. All opportunities we should take these possibilities, but even go beyond the possibilities that are already opened, because we have already many chances, many possibilities, but we must go on. We must go on this path and try new steps. That's all. Thank you very much for your patience.
Going to invite you to do a Visio with us and see all of this.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Josie. There is so much in this, and you gave a listing of some of these areas that we already know, and even the images that you brought forth were important to see women in these places and women from across the globe in this. And I want to thank you, and I also want to thank Miriam, who compiled this list. And to everyone, it was during the synod that a whole conversation was, well, what are these things that these roles that women already have or can do? And a recognition that we don't in different parts of the world have the same ministries. As Susan said, we have charisms that are abundant, but the opportunities aren't all there. And so, what was this? And so it was both Miriam and Josie who were at the synod with us who compiled a list of, here in some categories, it's not exhaustive, but here's what we can say that already women can do. And for example, a chancellor may be something that's known in Canada and the United States, but it's not necessarily known in another country or continent. And even the role of catechist, which Pope Francis made sure that we know is such an important role, in one country can seem that it's not as significant as it is in others. And so even opening up what this means as leadership role in Tanzania, and the full implications of this. And so what we are doing for all of you that are here is we are going to right now put in the chat in the 4 languages a listing for you. It's not exhaustive. But it's a wonderful list already of what women and laymen are able to do in canon law. And so we're going to, and thank you, Therese and Gianluca, for please putting this in the chat in our 4 languages so that you have this. We will also later post this on our website. But we're going to give you this because we have to let go of this mystery of what are these areas, because as Susan said, the spirit is generous and it's the community. And so what are the gifts? Who has the gift of preaching? Who has the gift, a judicial pastoral gift? Who has the gift and different forms of leadership, all of these. And so how do we together as a church make that transparent and have the conversations of these are all areas to say who has this gift, and are we opening this up because the church, the whole church is saying let's do this. So please, Therese, can you post these and just bring them forth to us in the chat? And while they're doing this, or Gianluca will just sit in silence for a little bit, reveling in what's not a secret, but is already known in the invitations. So we'll have a few minutes of silence. The Spanish is available now. The
Yes,
Italian
sister.
is here. The French is coming up. And the English. So we'll just have a few minutes of silence and let you open this up. And it will be available afterwards as well. So we'll just have some quiet before we go to the next part. But as you read this, I just invite you to look and see what is already happening in your diocese or in your country, and what's inviting you as you read this. So again, a few minutes of silence. pondering it. And already there are some questions about how do we respond to these opportunities, the difficulties of actually having it happen. And so we have our third wonderful presenter and expert with us. And so we have with us Professor Miriam Huygens. She's a Dutch theologian and ordinary professor of canon law at the University of Erfurt, Germany. For the Dicastery for Christian Unity, she serves as vice moderator on the Faith and Order Commission of the World Council of Churches and is advisor to the Anglican Roman Catholic International Commission. She served as an expert in the assemblies of 2023 and 2024, along with Josie. She's a member of the Commission for Canon Law and of Study Group 8 on Apostolic Nuncios. She's the moderator of the International Research Group of Theologians and Canon Lawyers called the Peter and Paul Seminar, which attends to reforms in canon law based on Vatican II. With this group, she co-moderated two projects of great relevance to our current webinar. One is accountability in a synodal church, and the other is reframing the understanding of participation in mission and leadership in a synodal church, a research project of the Peter and Paul Seminar. So for Miriam, we ask, what does canon law actually say about the participation of women in governance? We have this list, and has there been any developments? And what are some of those theological and canonical arguments that some bishops or other people of the church use in terms of possibilities for women participating in the governance of church and when others see only obstacles. So can you explain that to us? And we're already seeing a witness in the development of the participation of women in governance. The pictures and the statements from Josie offers that. But what does this mean for future developments, both in the church and the church universal? Because we are in that implementation stage of the church, and you are very much on the ground working on the canonical commissions that are asking these very questions. So to you, Miriam, it's wonderful to have you.
Well, thank you. I'm sharing my screen here as well. Yeah, I think this should be great. Well, thank you so much for inviting me, for being present at this webinar. I think it's great that we are having this because indeed the final document says in number 60 that many possibilities are there and that they remain untapped. But what does that really mean for so many people? And I'm going to speak to you today, as we just heard, as a canon lawyer. So the first question, what does canon law actually say about the participation of women and laymen in governance? And you heard already, I want to highlight this again, what Dr. Susan Wood said, namely, we speak about Christi Fidelis. That is the generic term for all the faithful. And then you have Christ's faithful laity, so the lay Christian faithful, if you like, which is more specific for the lay people. What is interesting is that the Code of Canon Law uses Christ faithful. It's ahead of everybody else, but the vocabulary of the church has not accepted this. We are still talking about laity and ordained. It's like I just returned from Australia. I love Australians. I love the English-speaking world, but so many in the English-speaking world will say, I was reading Mass, or I was saying Mass, the priest, or the people, lay people will say, oh, Father is saying, who is saying Mass today? And it's like, as Dr. Susan Wood was saying, we are all participants in that. And there is one presiding. So the first thing you all have to do, or we all have to do, is be attentive to our own language and say, what time are we celebrating the Eucharist today? That would be great. And not who is saying Mass at 10 o'clock. It's a change of perspective because we're all participating in this. So I will speak a little bit about the history to understand why we are partially operating in old structures and old ways of thinking. So you had the 1917 Code of Canon Law, and that 1917 code was speaking about clerics and said that they could exercise the power of jurisdiction. Now, to speak about the power of jurisdiction comes from, we could say, from a really legal perspective, maybe even Roman law perspective, but it's a really canonical perspective and not very theological. What is remarkable is that the cleric, so only clerics could exercise power of jurisdiction, but the cleric was one who had, and those of you who are older will still remember this, those who received tonsure. So it's not only today a cleric is a person who is a deacon, a priest, or a bishop. So the notion of cleric was much wider under the 1917 code. And then because of Vatican II, we find a first change already in 1971. A decision is made that laymen can be appointed as a judge in a tribunal for marriage cases. In the beginning, it's for marriage cases only. And it has to be a collegiate tribunal. That means there must be two other judges. And the two other judges, this is what the text is saying, must be clerics. So these were at the time priests or bishops or deacons. The deacons had just been introduced. Because in 1972, you get then this change of the minor orders that are abolished. So we don't have these tonsures anymore, and becoming a cleric is as of the permanent, as of being a deacon. Interesting is that in 1973, an American bishop from the United States who has asked a sister to study canon law at the Catholic University in Washington is writing to Rome and saying, this sister has all the training. She has been doing the work as a secretary here for many, many years now. And I would really like her to be appointed as a defender of the bond. And the Holy See is saying, yeah, that's fine. In 1974, the Holy See decides that not only for marriage cases, but for all kinds of cases we have, laymen can be appointed. So this is the first development. It doesn't go without tension because there are different schools of thoughts on this whole thinking. Now the considerations are then set up. What are the schools of thinking? And that will play a role from the closing of Vatican II up till now, actually. So you have two schools of thoughts, and you will be surprised probably if I would ask you who is in favor and who is against. I think many of you will think the German school will be in favor and the Italian school will be against. Well, it's exactly the opposite. So the Italian school of canon lawyers is a group that basically refers to history. And they will say, we just commemorate this year 1700 years of the Council of Nicaea. Well, who convoked the Council of Nicaea was the emperor, not the Pope. So the Italian school of canon lawyers will say there were emperors who convoked councils. They recall that there were popes who exercised jurisdiction, for example, by appointing bishops, before these popes being ordained a bishop themselves. You remember we just had an election and everybody was looking to the College of Cardinals who would be elected. But actually they could have elected any baptized man. And the rules are saying if he would have been elected before he presents himself, he will have to be ordained a bishop. That was changed during Vatican II. But there are a number of popes who already began their work, and they worked sometimes for a number of years before they were even ordained a bishop. And then there were females, so there were abbesses, who granted priests the faculty to hear confession. So there are examples in history that lay people could exercise this power of governance. The Munich school, on the other hand, said, well, wait a minute. Vatican II made a decision to restore the unity between ordination and jurisdiction. And you can see that with this new rule that if a layman was ordained, that person would have to be ordained, if it was chosen as a pope, would have to be ordained first. So there is this unity saying there is the one sacred power that they hold, that is to be held together. Well, that is true, but basically what we see is a conversation afterwards saying, well, would that hold for everybody? And the delicate issue is, it's a delicate question, that maybe we do participate, or we can exercise this in participating in the powers that are given to a bishop, but in view of the baptism. The Code of Canon Law is struggling with these two schools. And in the Code of Canon Law, you find a canon 129, that is decisive, saying that the power of governance can be exercised. And then it says that lay men and lay women, well, originally it said that they could participate in the power of governance. And that was under Pope John Paul II at the last minute, really almost the last evening before the Code of Canon Law was promulgated. It was changed in cooperation and not in participation. A decisive voice in that change came from the Archbishop, an earlier vote from the Archbishop of Munich, and the Archbishop of Munich was Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger. And as I just said, the German school is really the Munich school. So Ratzinger probably got these arguments also from the canon lawyers in Munich. But after the Code of Canon Law was promulgated, immediately the conversation continues. Why? Because there are some other canons who clearly state in their language and in their unfolding that lay people can and do exercise jurisdiction. So Canon 517 uses the word participate, participare, in pastoral care of a parish. Canon 1421 say that now, I had mentioned to you earlier, lay men could be appointed as judges. Now lay men and lay women can be judges in a collegiate tribunal with 2 clerics. And there is no discussion among the canon lawyers. If you are appointed as a judge, you do exercise this power of governance. That is very clear. So the Munich people are saying, oh, you can't apply this canon because it's against the system. But the truth is we have always continued using this. Another argument that is brought in the conversation is a canon on clerics, saying that only they can obtain offices for whose exercise is required the power of orders and the power of ecclesiastical governance. So cooperare, participare, the Italian school will tell you cooperare really means participare, and the Munich school will tell you, no, there was a change and we have to respect it. Interesting is then also the actions that the Pope takes. So in the law, you have the appointment of judges, but you also have the reality of the appointment of a religious sister as undersecretary at the Congregation of Institutes of Consecrated Life. And that has been already in the papacy of Pope John Paul II. So it's not only just Pope Francis. Pope Benedict XVI continues to make further development in this domain, and he will make an important clarification in 2010, in which he determined that priests are ordained in the person of Christ the head, and that deacons are ordained ad ministeriam, so at the service of the people of God. Interesting is that there is no reflection about what this means for the notion of cleric. So this is now becoming a little bit technical for those of you who are not canon lawyers, but really we have on the one hand saying lay people can only operate and work as judges with clerics, but we now have two different categories within the clerics. We have the priest and we have the deacons. And what is also interesting is that the clerics have always been allowed to be single judges, whereas layperson could only work in cooperation with 2 clerics. So the deacon, being a cleric, can continue to act as a single judge. And for example, in the Synod of 2023, one of the cardinals came to me and he said, why can I not appoint a woman as a single judge? Why is this not possible? So this was one of the things that also was voiced during the Synodal session in 2023. Interesting is that in 2010, you remember, lay men, lay women, an opening for marriage cases. The man then could do all cases. And then in 2010, there is a decision that lay men and women can be judges in the reserved penal cases of clerics. That means penal reserved cases are, for example, the cases of sexual abuse of minors. And so I have a friend, and I myself, I've acted in these cases, and we have been appointed to handle these cases of sexual abuse of minors. I did about 100 cases of instructing 4 bishops, 4 major superiors or clerics, the penal cases, and there was no problem with that. Actually, I was once delegated by the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith to do that. So then we have Pope Francis. So we also see a linear, and I think that's very important. There is a linear development. This is not just Pope Francis. This is from the beginning since the Second Vatican Council. Pope Francis abolishes the requirement that the layperson can only serve in a collegiate tribunal composed of 2 clerics, and says, oh, it could actually be 2 laypersons with 1 cleric. So imagine I would present to you 2 photos. In 1970, the marriage tribunal, the judges would be 3 clerics, 3 priests, and now you have a group picture, let's say for the occasion, because we're celebrating this, they all bring their wives and their husbands, because the 1 cleric could be a deacon and the children. So now you have a group picture of 2 women with their husbands and with their children, and you have the deacon with his wife and his children and grandchildren. What a difference. So what's behind all of that difference? So we have to ask if that is possible. Very important is also that Pope Francis abolishes a privilege. We heard earlier the equality of all the people of God. He abolishes a privilege of cardinals, bishops, and apostolic nuncios to be heard in trials at the Vatican city-state courts, because these trials were reserved to the Pope himself, and he now allows lay persons to serve as judges of these trials. So I think one of the most recent famous trials was the trial with Cardinal Becciu, and that trial was presided over by a lay man, but by the same token, this could be a lay woman. The law does not distinguish that. And the rationale that Pope Francis provides is all share equal dignity with equality with regard to dignity and activity in the building of Christ. And therefore, he said, standing in the court means we all have the same judges, no differentiation. Then we see a development in the Roman Curia. So there is a provision in the rules for the Roman Curia that the office of the leadership can, which does involve the power of governance, that this can also be given to lay persons, including sisters. I mean, for all practical purposes, canon lawyers do not differentiate between sisters and lay women. They're all lay people because you're either a lay person or a cleric. So he appoints 3 women as members of the dicastery for bishops. This is, I think, important. So Cardinal Pope Leo has worked with these 3 women in his dicastery. I think that's an important aspect for the current Pope. He appoints a female secretary to the dicastery for Institutes of Consecrated Life, and that female secretary later then becomes the female prefect, Sister Brambilla. And why is he able to do that? Because basically in the statutes that provide for this regulation, it actually says that they are operating with power, we call it vicarious power of the Pope. So they participate in the office of the Pope. So basically what you have in the Roman Curia in relation to the diocesan Curia, it's very simple. You have a vicar. We could say we have a vicar in the diocese for religious, a vicar for schools, a vicar for ecumenism. We have all kinds of vicars, and this is the same as the vicar for religious in the diocese would be the dicastery for religious in Rome. The vicar for schools would be the dicastery for education, the dicastery for ecumenism. So you have these parallel structures. The Pope Francis has then appointed a female secretary to the Synod of Bishops, who, because of her office, holds the right to vote in the Synod in 2021. And then, as we know, we also get the appointment of other lay persons, Christi Fidelis Laici, in the Synod itself. And then I don't know why I'm writing this here, at 2 women to the appoints 2 women to the 16th Ordinary Council of the General Secretariat of the Synod. Anyway, the next one is Pope Francis and Consecrated Life. This is interesting too, because we all know that there are religious institutes with clerics. So, for example, the Dominicans, the Franciscans, the Salesians, and if a decision is made in 2022 that the Superior General of these institutes, although they have clerics, does not need to be a cleric him self. So already more than 6 of these institutes now have a brother who is the general superior. And it's always been clear to me and to others that women religious do exercise executive power for example, by placing juridic acts such as erecting, suppressing provinces, admitting members to final vows. Those are acts with also juridic effects. Question 2, what are the theological and canonical arguments that cause some bishops to see or not to see the possibilities for women, for laymen to participate in the governance? Well, I think the reason is, if we go back to what Dr. Susan Wood was saying, really, if they look from the perspective of ordination, they will feel reluctant about this. But if they begin from the perspective, and if we do, and if we understand the whole church from the perspective of baptism, then we can better understand the possibilities. And I often say the law is not as bad as its reputation, but for many people we need to put on new glasses because we simply don't see what is possible. So I think it's the unfamiliarity, and what is needed is really a sharing. Actually, I had the privilege during the Synod to give a theological reflection. And it was actually done by somebody else, but I made an intervention there saying there are so many bishops who now have chancellors assisting them in the executive power. And many said, oh, I have that already. And I said very kindly, but who is making the signature, you or the woman? No, no, I'm doing the signature. I'm signing these decisions. Then I said, well, then she's basically a secretary. She is then not a decision-making institution, but you could do that. And it was interesting how bishops there in the room began to share with each other. I have already a woman who is doing that. And then they were saying, so what qualifications does she have? And how did you appoint her? And how is it going? So I think it's basically proclaiming the news, what is possible. And the final question, there is a development in the participation of women and laymen in governance. What are the implications for future developments? I think we have to go to number 66 of the final document, because in that number we can read the following: for a charism to be configured as a, so it's possible for bishops locally to develop, this is what I should say first, it's for bishops locally possible to establish new ministries. We don't have to wait for the Church Universal to do this. And number 66 helps us to understand the room that we must use and that we can use. So it says, for a charism to be configured as a ministry, the community must identify, I cannot see my whole screen here. Community, let me see this here. Anyway, this should be accompanied by discernment carried. Oh yeah, by for a charism to be configured as a ministry, the community must identify a genuine pastoral need. The community must identify that. This should be accompanied by a discernment carried out by the pastor, who, together with the community, will make a decision on whether there is a need to create new ministry. As a result of this process, the competent authority reaches a decision. A missionary synodal church would encourage more forms of lay ministries, that is, ministries that do not require the sacrament of holy orders, and this not only within the liturgical sphere, they can be instituted or not instituted. So we have a possibility for the bishop to enter into that discernment process. So the charisms leads to ministries instituted and not instituted. The bishop has the authority to decide. However, he would do this in a discernment process, and that discernment process should, of course, be a synodal process. And he could do that, for example, in a diocesan pastoral council. He could do that through a synod or different modalities that are there. What are aspects in that? You look to the needs, you look to the context, and you look to the available resources. So what we develop in, let's say, Nairobi does not have to be the same in Sydney or in Buenos Aires. There's no need for that. And actually, the church has always had different ministries in different places around the world. So I've put in my PowerPoint, which I think you will get later on, some further reading that you can do. And I'm making some advertisement for the book of Sister Susan Wood, which I think is a great book. So thank you so much for having me.
I mean, perfect. Thank you. We had a little tech bubble here. Miriam, this was wonderful. And what you did was just open up further both the possibilities that have been part of the movement. And often we think, it's Pope Francis who did all this, but you're actually showing us how the evolution of our thinking has been part of this journey. And it's part of our responsibility as people of faith here to say, okay, what do I need to know and learn? And so you're educating us on so much of this. And also, while there are implications certainly for religious life, being part of the church's movements as a whole, it's important to hear and see this. And both from the theological grounding, which we had with Susan, and the examples that both you and Josie put together, but then to say now, how do we have those conversations, and how do we go from those wonderful conversations at the synod, where there were bishops who said out loud, I have a chancellor, and honestly, there were bishops and persons who are not bishops who said, but are you sure? Is this allowed? And that wonderful moment where we're all learning together, and that, yes, it is. And you could be a delegate, you can be in many different areas, but as people were also asking the question, and you're pointing an example of, is this I have this role, but who signs, and what the significance is in that, and that a way of looking at this is going to have to be that we're learning together, that it can't be, us versus, but this, how do we together bring together the knowledge that's here and even go more deeply into who has this charism, and that's what cannot be stopped. The Spirit's abundant, and then where are the roles that are needed to be filled and utilized, and how do we expand those boundaries? So I know there will be lots of questions for you, with you, and here I mean you, Miriam, but also Susan and Josie. But let's just for 2 minutes hold some silence and people's comments. Uh, what do you want to ask? What would you like to offer? What are you already seeing? So just to take some moments to soak in, each piece has built on the other. Each one's expertise has come forth, but we also have expertise among you, all of you that are online. You're coming with experience and narrative. So how would you like to engage? So just 2 minutes of silence. Feel free to write on the side, and then we'll also open it to questions. Thank you. All right, friends, we open it up to your reflections, your questions. And this is really, I love us to spotlight all three speakers here as well to just see, what are the implications? What does this mean? And where do we go with this? So if you have a question you'd also like to ask out loud, please use in the React button. There's a section that says raise hand. And so we will do that as well. But even as a way to begin, I would just offer Susan a minute and Josie and then Miriam to respond to each other's comments. So Susan, what's stirring in you as you've been listening to this? And then Josie, what's been stirring in you?
Well, I love the canonical presentation of Miriam. It's interesting that the 1983 code was written very specifically to build on the theology of Vatican II. And that is so evident, in canonical developments. And what I really appreciate is how canon law and theology work together. And Miriam and I are working together in the Peter and Paul Seminar for that precise reason. It's a group of theologians and canonists. So, as a theologian, I sometimes think the impulse, particularly of religious women, is to go to the practical. Let's see, what's on the ground working. And I just really want to uplift the relationship between church and liturgy and how that works together, and how that really is also the foundation of the code. So I love the synergy there.
Wonderful. And it's true, we need all of those in order to even engage the development that's happening. So what does that mean? Josie, what are your thoughts? Josie, are you here? I hope we didn't lose you. Perfect. What are you thinking about?
Oui, j'ai beaucoup appris de la présentation de
I've learned a lot from the presentations, and this has inspired me because they spoke about an old way that has been changed in history. So this encourages for future. There are things that can be improved, that can go better. So the presentation of Miriam gave me hope. The presentation of Suzanne gave me strength for going on, going ahead in consciousness. It is necessary to make lay people conscious of their possibilities and responsibilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. It is so helpful to bring this together, and that is yet another reason to do this collaboratively and to work together as theologians, but the whole people of God. Miriam, you've already been referencing others in light of what you're saying. One of the comments we are getting, and it's coming in more than one place, is, the theory is wonderful, but it's a real challenge in terms of the local. And so what do we do? How do we engage this? So one area certainly is be educated about what is possible and to do it humbly, to that some will know, oh, these areas already women are doing in laymen, and there are places and ways of understanding ministries that are evolving in different areas. But how do we walk this way of, well, it says this now, but I don't see this in my location. How do we look at even discerning in particular places, these calls? What would you offer us? Because you're always working between the theory and people's realities.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. First, I really liked what José also presented by way of photos, and I think because these are not just, we have made a list with the 2 pages and all the positions you have, but then you see the photos with the real people, and they are around the world. So I think that we should feel encouraged, which means they are acting in conformity with the law. They are not acting against the law, and they're not acting, and sometimes they're acting beyond the law, that is true, but that is allowed. The law itself allows for a further development. It says that custom is the best interpreter of the law, and you can have customs, of course, in agreement with the law. You can have customs that develop beside the law and customs even against the law. And the reason for that is that the sense of the faithful is stronger than the power of the legislator. So there you go. This is a very strong statement. So the sense of the faithful is stronger than the power of the legislator. So if a community practices something for more than 30 years with the intention that it is binding, it has become the force of law. That I think is often underestimated as well. I think the first thing is that we like I said, the law is not as bad as its reputation. And people think and leave it to oftentimes to cleric to be told what is in the law without verifying whether that is true or without checking with people who have studied this. And I'm really grateful that increasingly we see so many women religious also become canon lawyers. I always think they should not just focus on the constitutions of their own institute, because that's an internal business. They should really take up these big subjects and see what that really means, and not just how is the novitiate organized in my congregation. You will always get time from your superiors to study that question if there is a need in your institute, but they will never allow you again to go back to the big foundational questions. And that would be so, I think, so important. Power, knowledge is power, I would say. So education, but also I really want to share this. When I wanted to study canon law in the 1980s, I went to my bishops and in the Netherlands, and they said, "Oh no, we can't. No, 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 no." And then I went to women religious, and about 20 congregations in the Netherlands said, "We will put the money on the table for you to study." And they said something else. They said, "You should not just get a licentiate." Because the bishops had also said, if I would ever study, a licentiate would be enough. Because they said, your first qualification will be a non-qualification. You are not ordained. And after that, and then they said, with the priest, you will have the same qualification, a licentiate. So you should get a doctorate. And then I think what was really amazing, the women religious in the Netherlands, so coming back with a doctorate, they said to me, we never supported you to work in the Netherlands. You will work in the vineyard of the Lord. Wherever the Lord will call you, that's where you're going, not for our little backyard. So today they are very happy that I am where I am, and I'm very happy I'm still in touch with them. But I think this is also something that women could see. What kind of scholarships can we provide, not only for religious, but also for other women? How can we organize this so that people get trained to look into the rights of people? But then also in other domains of theology, so that like Susan was also, and José is an example of this, a member of an international theological commission. So if you have your training, you are at the table and you can participate in a qualified way. And then I think also we must, so the question is, a webinar like this, how many men are on the screen? Every single man on the screen, I think we can personally welcome, because there are always so few. It seems that the question about the participation of women seems to be a question for women. And this was also a little bit in the Synod, like it is very quickly the tendency, oh, the women can write the paragraph, or the women can, work on that question. No, this should be a concern for all of us. So there, I think it's important that we invite each other to come and to give lectures and to speak to the people and to say this is what we are doing, and to share that good news. I think that that's very, very important. But also to get the men on board. Wouldn't it be wonderful if the USG would organize this thing, and all these religious working in parishes where they all help out on Sundays or have a full-time job, if all the religious men around the world would implement this, we would have a different church.
That's a great invitation, and we do work with our brothers, and so that's a call to continue and to say, you know, what will this mean, and how do we work together? You've called also forth all of us online, or those who will watch the recording, of the call of our education and to be educated, and that it is for the wide church. When you think about all the women, and here I'll speak specifically women religious, but not only, who received doctorates after Vatican II, and the renewals that were going on after Vatican II, 60 years later, this is another moment. Paragraph 28 of the Synod document says this is synodality is speaking to us about both spiritual renewal and structural reform. So for us to be in those spaces of continuing the outflow, this is very important for the education of women and laymen, and also our brothers who are ordained to be educated in these areas. So there's something about that final document, part 5, that says formation, 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 ongoing formation, and together. So to do this, which is, again, why it's wonderful we're here with Wukwo, looking at this and asking these questions, but also saying, as religious, here are services for the church in the world too. So it's the both and so you've made a call. We need more canonists with that lens of service, and also theologians, and from all over the world. All over the world. So Josie, you bring a perspective to the global lens from where you are working in Kinshasa and other places, and Susan from the United States, but also in Canada and working internationally. And then Miriam, you know, all the places you do, and the narratives of what happens when we really help one another. How someone, a young woman from the Netherlands, was encouraged, and how we have to help each other in this. So you have here in some of the comments, I haven't kept up with all of them, but you know, there's so many areas in Spanish about the importance. There are women in all kinds of parishes. We're in all these areas. And so how to then move this question forth and these realities? And how do we have this conversation with our brothers and sisters? So together. Angelica says there will be tensions within a national church and the various dioceses if there are different acknowledged ministries. So I wonder, Josie, Susan, Miriam, these various ministries that a bishop can open up. One question is it only, and is it always going to be the bishop that has to open it up? And what's the role of the people of God in saying, there's a need here, or there are possibilities, or there are people with gifts here that are longing to be used. And then your own experiences from the different places. So some thoughts of what's happening in your locations, and have you felt that sense that a national church, a country, will have tensions if in some dioceses they do or don't? Susan or Josie?
I have some to say. My response is, I think it goes back to the necessity of dialogue. You know, so it's formation, 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 but it's dialogue, dialogue, dialogue. And we have enormous tensions in the church, at least we do in North America. And that's what I can speak for. I can't speak for the rest of the world. But in seminary formation is sometimes gives a different mindset than the people in the pew. And that's then there's a dialogue sometimes between parishioners and pastor, or priests and bishops, even because bishops parachute into their diocese so often. They're not, they don't grow up in those dioceses. And I certainly underline what Miriam said about the necessity of education. And I think that listening, the listening in the spirit that was the procedure for the synod is what's necessary to bridge this gap so that those who are in leadership in the church can hear the people, and the people can, also make known their needs, which Vatican II encourages, to the pastors. And in our structure, people can offer services, but it is, I think, still the case that, a pastor is, and the bishop are in charge of ordering the charisms of the parish and the diocese in a way. And so there are those tensions. So I think there can be initiatives at the grassroots, but it can't be against, the pastor or the bishop. It has to be in dialogue with them. And unfortunately, then sometimes that takes time.
So you're asking us both to learn how we can engage with one another and create those spaces in all of our places. So how can we together discern what the calls are in the midst of this? What has been your experience, Josie?
Expérience.
And you'll have to unmute. Perfect. Unmute.
In many dioceses in Africa, I met in my life some bishops who were committed and who were opened, but others who were not opened. Bishops who were opened, they were experts in common law, and they were very well prepared, and they had a different glance. So we need women who have formation and who are ready to be responsible and to collaborate with the bishop. The same can be said for lay people. So bishops should be opened. But I also met in my life bishops who were not opened at all. They were a little narrow-minded, and they were focused on a dogmatic theology, and they had a different idea of being a lay person. So people may have formation, charisma, but in front of difficulties, they need to be opened to clarify and to solve problems and obstacles. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. And you're calling for the engagement of everyone in the local church alongside our brothers, sisters in this moment. So thank you for looking at this and seeing, yes, it's going to take time, as Susan said, and yet there's a holy impatience that's important as well. And so how do we create those spaces for dialogue? How do we engage the equal right and dignity that comes from our baptism and being members of a community, acknowledging different roles? Miriam, where would you engage us in this? how might we go
Yes,
forward?
I could not unmute, sorry. But I'm here now. Thank you so much for all your comments. I think, yeah, the challenges are large. I've also tried to read a little bit in the chat. Some people are saying it will be difficult if some bishops will go, others will not go within, for example, the territory of an Episcopal conference. Well, this is not uncommon. So what you often have is that the Episcopal Conference will discuss this and they will leave it indeed to the individual bishop to make some decisions. So, for example, permanent deacons do not appear in whole parts of the church, and in other parts they are very much developed, and that's even an ordained ministry. So I think we can see. I know of a colleague of mine who tells me that in the country where he is working at the moment as a missionary, the bishops are forbidding women to do even the readings. I mean, and you can say, how can the bishop forbid that? Because even at the funeral of the Pope, there was a woman doing a reading, right? So sometimes it takes a bit more to convince people. So yes, the formation is important, but I think also that we have this dialogue and open the views and have good theological reasoning, and sound reasoning that's then going on. Yeah, so stay in dialogue, that's all I can say, and look into that formation and encourage each other. I was recently on a plane and I saw the movie by it's about the, oh, what's her name now? The Italian sister who started in New York with the children. Well,
Oh,
somebody will write it in the thing.
Sister
In
Cabrini.
Cabrini, indeed. Thank you so much. And Cabrini, she had to go 10 or 11 times to Rome to finally get a yes that she could go because she believed in it. So I think the stamina is also necessary. But then the Pope said to her, if we are going to do this, you better be successful because otherwise they'll say, you see, we told you they can't do this. So, and that would then require stamina, and she did have that to set examples. You have people like Mary Ward going new roads, developing that. So I think this has always been in the church for people to go and to begin something. And often ministries are born out of a need. Now, one of the things that the Canon Law Commission is also considering is if we have, for example, diocesan pastoral councils, parish pastoral councils, I would say these are the places to discuss these subjects. But it would also be important that the members of those councils have a right, indeed, to bring these items on the agenda. And so that is also an aspect to look in. Who sets the agenda for all these meetings? So begin there and see how you can have that, and ask that you have these bodies with a good representation.
Thank you. Thank you for that. One of the questions that's come up has been asking about how do you engage, and I'm going to give this to Susan to start with, the Petrine principle, the Marian principle for what it is that women can do and women cannot do and what men can do. So it's been used at various times with von Balthasar. Could you explain and offer a response for us, please?
Well, I read that in the chat, and I was trying to figure out how to reply even individually to that question. I am as much ill at ease with that principle as the writer of the comment. So first of all, I want to congratulate whoever made that comment, because I think we've sometimes used gender complementarity to the detriment of women in leadership. And I think there can be a complementarity, but I think spousal imagery in the church is often misused. And the idea is that women are receptive, and the Peter principle is that men are active and leaders and in authority, and that just simply doesn't happen. Elizabeth Johnson, who is a theologian who's done a lot of work on Mary, has a wonderful essay where she deconstructs a certain kind of Mariology, which is the Mary that none of us can imitate because none of us are at the same time, virgin and mother. And it's the Mary on the plaster pedestal. It's the receptive, quiet, this kind of submissive notion of women. She deconstructs that, and then she does a construction, a positive construction of a Mariology in the line of liberation theology, who is this wonderful, strong, courageous woman, who has to flee, who is an immigrant, to another country, when her child is threatened, who takes the leadership of asking Jesus at Cana to do something, in that situation. And so the problem with these typologies is that sometimes they fix us in a certain cultural mode or context that does not tell the whole story. And so I do have a problem with that, as so did the writer.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And it will be engaging this. And someone also reminded us that there's a Sister Plorcher who also gave a response to Linda to this question in a conversation with Pope Francis. So it will be important to say, what are those images we're using? And are they helpful? And where is that sense of complementary? Those are places to ask some of those questions of what's helpful and what's not at this moment, acknowledging difference and yet the unity, and where is something being used to divide versus move forward. Question here is, if as we go forward and we are in the implementation stage, where do each of you see the call for implementation going forward? You've each given where we are. Move us, move us. What's happening, Miriam, in canon law? You are working with a number of different questions. Are there any you can tell us that this is part of what we're looking at in light of implementation today? Josie, you work with the International Theological Commission. What's moving us forward? What are the questions as we go forward we're trying to look at? And Susan, what do we need theologians to engage further? There's whole sections, both in 2023 in November, Pope Francis wrote a message for all theologians and calling us to both have our feet on the ground and to be listening to the people and to use the distinctions in cultures and different lenses. But there's also a call in the final synod document to theologians to be on the ground and involved in parishes. And for all the people here, what's our call in implementation? Miriam is saying, please get involved at the local level. That's where the movement is going to be happening. So as you think, all of you online, where you are, what's something you can do? We can talk, but what are we also being called to? And somebody on the chat said, let's look at our constitutions and how do we really have synodality? What do we say, but actually what do we do? So the word and minding the gap between what we say and do. So just inviting the three of you to reflect on those areas. Miriam, what's happening already that's in motion that we should be praying with you alongside, and also how might we engage? And you'll see what's going on with the Theological Commission. And then Susan, what's our call? What's the call of theologians? And what do you ask of all of us?
Well,
simple.
Maybe I can begin with that. So I think what is really needed is these different glasses and lenses that I always say. So there's much more possible in the law, but we don't see it. And therefore, this is, I think, what we were trying to do in this webinar with the presentation of Susan, to show if you take a different perspective, you can already move. So there is no need in the change of the law as much as people sometimes think. And the change of the law will not bring about. So I give you a simple example. It's possible to have parish, diocesan pastoral council. Women can be leaders of that, facilitate all these meetings, can be members of that. But if there is no change of mentality, the priest will call these meetings and will put things on the agenda that have no big relevance. And they will meet once a year, and everybody can say, yes, we have these bodies, but they're not effective. So it required is a change of mentality, and lawyers cannot bring about a change of mentality. We can't. We can give you a new prescription for your glasses. So go and ask what lenses you are wearing. And am I really aware? And how, like I said before, it begins with language, like who is saying mass today? So if from today on the whole world would simply say, when are we celebrating the Eucharist? When are we, discerning something, a subject that we want to discern about? And I think that language is of tremendous influence.
Thank you. Language does shape thought, and you're asking us to look at our language and also to engage at the different levels that we are already and what's possible. And that's the challenge. It was the challenge in Vatican II, but it's also ours of spiritual renewal. And I think that's a piece of the conversion being asked of us is, what am I invited to look at? Josie, what would you offer us? I cannot tell if you're frozen. There you are. Perfect.
I propose, first of all, formation of women for women. They should be more numerous and available and well-trained women are needed. Some bishops say that women are not enough, have not enough formation. But this is a justification. We are involved and committed in formation for women. Discussions and debates with lay and bishops. It is necessary for priests, lay people, and bishops to be aware of that lay people are mature enough in their life, but also in their competence. So there is a lack of confidence compared to the possibility for lay people, women and men, in participating actively. On the contrary, more confidence should open the hearts. And we should, I insist, we should help the bishops to open their mind, to be confident, and give room to lay people, men and women. Thank you.
Thank you, Josie. And I'm seeing this in the message as well from our WUCWO president, Monica, that lay women and men are fundamental to help bishops and priests change mentality. And in there, we have to have that change of mentality as well. And we need the good formation and to promote dialogue. So what an invitation to our congregations that when we have our ongoing education, when we bring in presenters, when our universities and schools of theology, when our organizations have things, how do we make this kind of education and engagement available for all? So how do we open that up in more places? So invite our seminarian brothers, our sisters together. What a call you're giving us, and to find ways to do this, to create resources for translation so that these are available for everyone, and not just one community or one group, but that we can find this. So thank you so much, Josie. You're calling us. I appreciate it. Susan.
Yes, thank you. I've had a deep desire for a long time for religious women, and that is that we include a better theological foundation in the formation of women's religious communities. Because I think historically, and we're trained to, if we're a teacher, we get trained in teacher education. If we're in hospital work, we get trained for hospital work. And so often, novitiate education is centered on spirituality, enough scripture so you could pray with scripture. You're taught the spirituality of your own congregation. But there is a lot that has been lacking, I think, in religious formation in terms of a general theological education. And if women are going to be at the table with our brothers who are ordained, we have to be at that table, and with a certain amount of equality. Now, none of us, all of us do not receive Master of Divinity degrees, and not everybody is called to be a theologian. But I think we have to raise the bar in the general theological education if we're going to be taken seriously. Because, and so I think we need to seriously look at that need in the church today and arrange our formation programs accordingly.
Thank you for that. And I think in considering WUKWO too, it's just what is lay formation? What is formation for the people of God, and how do we find ways to bring that? I think you're asking us in religious life to look at our formation programs. What is our ratio and what's in it? And how is it that if we are offered opportunities, and that seems to be a direction, how do we help each other also with the skill building, and how do we help each other learn to really dialogue? And at the synod, a key question was, can you really listen? Can you really listen, listen underneath? And in the listening, also being able to hear. And it's mutually receptive listening so that we have something to offer and also something to bring in to this. We have had more than once somebody say, please don't forget, there are all kinds of groups that are emerging in this time, just as post-Vatican II did. And one is coming from one of our sisters, Sister Anne Beatrice Fay, who's in Senegal and is one of the theological experts. We were with her at the synod. And after the first session of the synod, she was really inspired and felt the deep call for building this kind of theological education on the ground, all the way up and through. And so there's a school of synodality in Senegal. So those of you who are French speakers, there's a lot of resources online, and there are opportunities to both read and to listen to what's going on and to engage. And so please be attuned and attentive to this. I think at least one or two of our speakers spoke of the importance of ways of engaging, and conversation in the spirit is one of those ways of listening and being prepared and offering what's possible. I also want to say in the English speaking world, the School of Synodality coming out of England is also another space for wonderful resources and engagement. And we're all trying to work together with one another in this so that it's listening to each other and saying, what are you doing? How do we, and how do we invite more and more people? So if this is a church of 1.4 billion people, but also is our ecumenical lenses continue and are called to grow. Like it's the widest people of God that are being called forth in this for love and justice, for peace building, for reconciling and truth telling. I want to thank our speakers, our presenters and conversation partners. You're doing wonderful, wonderful work, and we thank you for giving time in the midst of all your commitments that we are naming just a few of them. So Susan, Josie, Miriam, thank you for this. And I want to thank all of you who took time to do this, to be here. Please, this will all be available. And we ask you, share this, share this, share this with 5 to 10 people in this Pentecost season. Say, I just want to invite you to watch this video, to see this listing of what's possible. Go to some places that will stretch you and maybe others in an invitatory way. Wow, here's some ministries I didn't realize. Here's ways of looking at church and even our language. I'm gonna work on this. So it's an invitation as our thank you to you for coming to share this link. You'll get this. Sister Trez will send this the recording link, and it'll be on our YouTube in the 4 languages and be available for all. We couldn't do this without our interpreters, so we thank you, merci, gracias, grazie, hvala lepa for all of this, and Gianluca for keeping us online, Therese to keep all of this communication happening back and forth on so many levels. Our dear friends, Monica, thank you. I just look forward to more possibilities of how we can work together. We're all being called here. Sister Roxanne, thank you for representing UISG here and bringing us to this moment. On June 25th, for those of you who have interest, we will be doing we're doing this quarterly now, a training on conversation in the spirit that both gives the theological and spiritual undergirding